This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to
We're Watching Here.
This is Opinionated Movie Talk with Chris and Perry. My name is Chris Williams. With me, he's the Noah Cross to my Hollis Mainway, Perry Seibert. How you doing, Perry?
I'm okay. I have some backstory. Turns out I had no idea, but I'm doing good. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. Let's take this episode right now, right off the top, to talk to our listeners and say, last time we recorded our Godfather trilogy, I said, hey, it's been a crazy time, but we're back on track and we're getting some episodes out to you. And we have not gotten an episode out to you in over a month, maybe almost two. That's my bad. Life got crazy. We are kind of figuring out what normal looks like. And so that's made my job crazy. That's made my life crazy. It meant by the end of the day, I had the energy to maybe watch an episode of Girls 5 Eva before I just collapsed into bed. So there was very few movies. There was very few podcasting, but we are back, and I can say this with confidence. We have a recording schedule that we have started to map out, and you're going to start getting some episodes. We are going to dive right back into our Summer of the 70s series here, and we're going to be talking about Chinatown today, and I'm very excited about that. But Perry, it's been about 2 months. What have you been watching?
So much, but I want to talk about somebody we've talked about just far too much in the history of this podcast because he made another really good movie. Let's talk about No Sudden Moves, shall we? Steven Soderbergh's latest, which is on HBO. Let's. It's such a joy. Absolute fantastic crime comedy drama. It's not a thriller. It's not quite it's a drama, I guess. But it's got some good laughs in it and a spectacular cast, all doing fantastic work. Especially, it's a pleasure to see Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro both back with Steven Soderbergh as sort of the co-leads of this whole endeavor. Boy, the less said, the better. It's a blast to watch. A really strong screenplay by the director, by the man who wrote the Men in Black films. A beautiful evocation of period era Detroit, where it was actually shot here last fall. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying much about it because it really is. The less you know going in, the better off you, the more fun you're going to have. And boy, it really is fun with a fantastic surprise cameo late in the movie.
This one frustrates me because it has been sitting in my HBO Max queue since it debuted. I've been really curious about this because I love Out of Sight, which was the last one he made in Detroit. And No Sudden Move was actually filmed 3 blocks from my office. I work at a university downtown, and one of our buildings was actually used for a lot of the office scenes they have in there. And my boss actually was the one kind of brokering a lot of that with Steven Soderbergh and his people. So excellent. I've been hearing about this. I was begging, is there a way I can get on that set? But obviously the pandemic took all that away, but they were talking about that even before everything shut down. I've wanted to see this and it has just not happened yet. And I'm really frustrated and hoping that soon I can take an advantage of a few days off and actually sit down and push play because it looks really good. I've heard good things, and I love seeing Detroit on the big screen. It doesn't happen a lot, and it's usually standing in for another city, and I just love looking at Detroit on the big screen.
It's a pleasure. It has that. It reminded me of how the Coen brothers used New Orleans to stand in for generic 1920s, 30s American city. They never name it as New Orleans, but that's where they shot it. And once you know that, you can kind of see it and get the feeling of it. But it's not so specific. And this is set in the 50s, I believe, late 50s, late 50s. And it's great. It doesn't. I mean, Detroit looks great in it, and it's great to know that it was actually shot there. I mean, it's not so much so that I wouldn't know. You know, if you told me they'd shot it somewhere else and just called it Detroit, I wouldn't know any better. But knowing it even it's all the more spectacular. It looks good even in the outrageous wide angle lenses that Soderbergh employs throughout much of the film.
I can't wait for this. I'm really, he's having like the best retirement ever. Like, I hope I can retire like he does, where it just seems like retirement just means I'm doing better work than I've done in a long time. And having so much
talked about his retirement recently on Mark Maron's podcast. He was on WTF to plug this movie and talked. Because Maron will ask anything, and Maron just openly asked about the retirement, and he talked about what he was going to do and his plans, and how he said it lasted about 2 months, and I was bored stupid, and then I got the script for the Nick, and I was back at work.
Yeah, and has he put out almost as many movies post-retirement as he did pre-retirement?
Nowhere close.
Because he worked so fast.
Remarkably prolific, though, even before that. So
that's true.
No, he's not that close. But it's good. I like the fact he said in this interview, he makes the distinction between movies and films. And Maron asks him, "What's the last film you made?" And he really thinks about it, and then he says, "Che." And it's telling that in other interviews, he's talked about how it was while shooting Che that he completely lost the plot of his own career and what he wanted to do.
Oh, wow. I'll have to listen to that too. Well, that is No Sudden Move. That is on HBO Max. I'm just curious, have you been back to the theater yet?
I have, but only for press screenings.
Okay. I haven't even done that. I stopped doing that. I've been paying like a schmuck, but I have gone. I've gone a few times to see a few things with my kids. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about something we don't talk about a lot, which is a stand-up comedy special that I saw about 2 months ago and have not been able to stop thinking about. It's kind of haunted me. And that is Bo Burnham's Inside. Have you seen that?
I have not watched it yet. I've heard many things about it.
Okay, this is on Netflix. This was something that I did have a rare Friday night where I got home. I feel like it was like 10 o'clock and I put it on. And I really just wanted something that was light, that was going to make me laugh and not have to think. And I was not, like, I'll just start this off by saying I was not familiar with Bo Burnham's comedy. I'd probably seen a few things on YouTube here and there, but I really knew him from 8th grade. We talked about him. He was in Promising Young Woman. So I was just expecting, kind of a lighthearted, thing talking about the pandemic. This is something he filmed in his house over the space of a year. I had no idea this was his first stand-up special in 5 years because he had panic attacks on the stage.
Yeah.
I knew none of that. And it's a very funny special at times. It's very much, riffing on internet comedy and different veins of that. And it's very funny when he does that. But it's also something that I think it captures the kind of this low-key anxiety that has just always been there for the last 16 months. This anxiety and depression that you can just kind of feel always there. And it starts kind of as a joke, but by the end of it, it takes on a weight, and it sent me kind of spiraling for a whole weekend. Because it's like the last 16 months have been hard on everyone. And I think we've all, had our moments of anxiety and depression. And this just kind of, this has been really tough. And it's almost claustrophobic because you are in the same room with him throughout this entire thing. And you feel that claustrophobia. You feel that frustration of having to put together comedy without any audience. Mm-hmm. It's really remarkable. It's sometimes very funny, but it's more the experience is just really intriguing. Like it sticks with you. And I've been listening to the songs because some of the songs are really funny and really, really clever. But it's one of the artifacts that I do think coming out of everything, it captures that kind of am I going crazy feeling that we've all had for the last year. And I really recommend this. It was just nominated for a ton of Emmys. All for Bo Burnham because he did it all on his own. And it's on Netflix right now. I think it's actually coming out into theaters for one night only next week. As we record this, I think like July 30th or 31st, it's going to be in theaters for one night. And it's really something. It's that rare comedy special that kind of shakes you up a little bit and doesn't really feel like a comedy special by the end of it.
If you remember, during the run for 8th grade, he talked openly about how that film came about because he found out he had so many female fans who were that age who wrote to him about how his expressions of his anxiety were so helpful and they connected so strongly with them. And so he's learned that that's a very rich vein for him. And I have no doubt that he learned stuff from 8th grade that gets put to use in this special. I need to watch it.
It's really good. Some of it's really funny. Like I said, some of it gets a bit darker. Some of it's all that at the same time. And I must have I feel like I came to 8th grade. Yeah, I wasn't doing Detroit Film Critics at that year or anything. And so I think I saw 8th grade well after the year when it well after the time when it was winning all the critics awards and stuff. And I kind of was like, I guess I'll get around to this. Loved it.
Great.
But I missed all the talk surrounding it. But yes, I will also say, if you have not seen 8th grade, see 8th grade.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Yeah. So we're going to transition from talking about really great new movies to really great old movies.
Well done.
We last time we talked, we started a series called The Summer of the 70s, where we're going to talk about really some great movies from the 1970s, all of which you've seen. Some of them are first times for me, but I've seen so far. I've seen Chinatown. I had seen one of the Godfathers. This week we're talking Chinatown. We're talking Chinatown, and this actually kind of had its seeds in you talking about the book The Big Goodbye a few months ago.
Yeah, Sam Wasson's just spectacular book about the making of Chinatown that really is secretly a look at the history of LA from about 1960. Actually, it reaches back into the 50s, but basically from about 1968 to about 1978. It's great. I cannot recommend the book highly enough. Wasson's written just a series of spectacular nonfiction books about different people and different eras in entertainment history. And this is an absolute jewel. I talked about it at the time, how like the chapter where he writes about Robert Towne developing the script, and Robert Towne worked on this script for nearly a decade. In some form. He was really, really, really intricately lost in this story for much of the late 60s and throughout the early and mid 70s. That the chapter takes on the cadence and tone of Raymond Chandler. And it's spectacular how Wasson does it. It's not intrusive and it's not showy. It's just right. You feel Robert Towne's obsession with getting this on the page. And that's so hard to do in a nonfiction book. The book's incredible, as is the movie.
Yeah.
So, whichever one you get to first, fine. I would say watch the movie first, but yes, whichever one you get to one or both of them as soon as you can.
Yeah. I had the nice pleasure of, I saw Chinatown. Last time I saw it was probably 10 years ago. Like it had been a while. So I read the book after I had your recommendation, and I read it while I was on vacation back in May and loved it. And so then that really made me think, okay, well, we're going to be talking about Chinatown. I need to see it again. Well, when I finally sat down and watched Chinatown, it was like watching it for the first time, which was really great. But then the book just informs all that as well. It just really made it a much richer experience. Also, I will say, if you have not seen Chinatown before we start talking about it, we probably will spoil it. It's about 50 years old almost at this point. So you really don't have an excuse to have avoided spoilers. But also you can see it. It is one of the rare films made before 1980 that is available on Netflix right now, and you can watch it on Netflix. And I don't think it probably looks as good as a nice Blu-ray, but it is on there for you. So
it looks pretty good in whatever format you see it in.
It is a gorgeous movie.
Let's be really clear. It looks really good in any format. Don't worry about it.
Well, Perry, if you want to take this and just talk a little bit about what Chinatown is about for people who may not have seen it in a few years.
Chinatown is about Jake Gittes, a private eye played by Jack Nicholson, who lives in Los Angeles. And I think it's the late 30s?
It is
underway.
1937, the same year that Jack Nicholson was born. And incidentally, the same year my house was made.
Oh, outstanding. You feel very connected to this work.
Yes.
He is a private eye who works mostly as a snoop, taking pictures of cheating significant others, who, when a woman comes into his office, hires him to snoop on her husband. He turns out to be a bigwig in the water department in the water department in the city of Los Angeles, and then tensions ensue and complications occur. I just want to leave it at that. I don't want to dig deeper, not only because the pleasure of watching how well Robert Towne and Roman Polanski dish out the morsels of information you need throughout the course of the film is an utter pleasure. And honestly, Chris, for all the times I've watched this film, and it's got to be at least a dozen over the course of my life, I don't think I could succinctly explain the whole plot unless I'm sitting and actually watching it in the moment.
Yeah, no, the same. But the thing I wanted to start off talking to you about, because I know you have opinions on this, is this a noir?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, totally. Because I would almost call it so if you want to get really strict, and I do like to with noir, because I think that's a very, I took a whole class in college. It was noir as genre. And I will argue till the end of time that noir is not a genre. It's a style. Mm-hmm. And those are two very different things. Noir is a style that is dependent on a lot of things. It's dependent on a certain a fear of the past, a sense of mortality. Ideally, it's dealing in very dark material. It kind of has to. It's film noir. And some other things that if you want to get into some deep reading on this topic, there's lots of good writing about the history of noir. Paul Schrader's Notes on Film Noir is one of the greatest articles I've ever read on the subject. And noir sort of, you got to remember the history lesson. Edit some of this out so I don't sound so.
Oh, I'm not editing it. Great.
So noir comes about because during World War II, when France was under German occupation, Hollywood films weren't brought in. They didn't exist. They couldn't, the Germans weren't allowing the Hollywood propaganda to show up in Vichy France. And so after the war is over, Hollywood is sitting on this 5-year supply of films that the French have never seen. And so they dump it. It all goes overseas so that they can squeeze as much money out of these films as they can. This is free found money for the studios. And what happens is the young French critics at the time, who all basically become the great directors of the French New Wave, see these films and they realize that there is a darkening of the American film, both in the content and what is being talked about and in physically the look of the films. The films got darker and grimier as a response to what was going on in the country. And so they dubbed it film noir. That's why it has a French name. It's the French film critics that gave it this. And by that point, that happened so late. That happened by the mid-50s that by that point, noir never got a chance to sort of know what it was. No director said, I'm making a film noir. They were going along with what was fashionable at the time. There was this strain and they realized and they were doing it, but it didn't have a name. And so the cycle as itself comes to an end pretty much with Aldrich's Kiss Me Deadly and Wells's Touch of Evil. This is from the Schrader article, straight up, is about the two totem ends of noir. And then the 70s happened. which is, we've talked about numerous times. It ends the production code, so now films really can talk about anything they want. And so there were a bunch of the really savvy, film brat generation, the greatest generation of filmmakers ever out of America anyway. Not that Roman Polanski was American, but he's certainly of their age and one of them as a contemporary. There started being a response to that critical interpretation of those films. And you see the concept of the neo-noir gets born, of films that were consciously playing with these images and with our memories of these things. And for me, Chinatown isn't that. It is a classic noir, just presented in the Watergate era, just with the full weight of the scandals of 70s America baked into it. That's why it feels new. It's not. It's consciously old-fashioned in the best possible ways. And we'll talk, I'm sure we'll talk more about this. And it's fun to talk about this in the context of No Sudden Moves, which is so very much a noir in its own way as well. But that's why this to me is absolutely a noir. It is all about not being able to outrun the past. It is all about being in a state where you don't really understand what's going on, which is key to so much noir. That there is just awfulness near you at all the time, and you don't know when it's going to strike. There is paranoia in noir all the time in the best noirs. And yes, through and through. This is if only it had been made 30 years earlier, it would be a textbook noir.
Yeah, I think what initially made me ask the question was, first off, I knew you had opinions on it, so I just wanted to set you up for that anyway. But also, it is funny because in my mind, I remembered Chinatown differently. Like, I remembered it as being a very heavy, really using some of the signifiers that we think of. Like, I thought there was voiceover narration in it still in there. I thought it was a much darker, like tonally darker film. Not tonally, literally darker film. Like I recalled this being a film of a lot of shadows and dark. No, it's a very light film. And so that threw me off, because I'm like, this is not a film with a ton of like scenes taking place on crowded or murky, seedy streets or anything. Like, this is a film where most of the scenes take place in the day. It's the desert.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that
there's
thematic.
A drought.
Yeah.
Lots of sun.
And everything is white in this. Everyone is wearing white. Every wall is just bone white. Like, you get so thirsty watching this movie. And I knew to look for that this time, because that's in the book. They make a point of saying that in the book, that was actually something Evans did not like when he first started seeing it. What was that, very harsh look that it has. But yeah, it is very much a character just kind of being drawn into the ugliness that's kind of making up this whole town, and that's there. And I noticed too, JJ Gittes starts off wearing a lot of white, and by the end of the film, he's wearing a lot of black and darker colors. And God, I mean, this is really one of those movies where I love this, where I'm watching it and I'm not thinking about how smart it is. I'm not thinking about what it's doing.
No,
it's just telling a really good story. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh, everything, like the thing that clicked for me, and again, spoilers, this isn't a huge spoiler, but it's there. The film opens with Burt Young, right? And he's the jilted husband who wants proof that his wife's sleeping with him. And God, no, sleeping around on him.
Yes.
And he gets that proof, and you initially start the movie thinking, oh, this poor guy, he's a victim. He's been wronged. And then at the end of the movie, you go back to his house and you see his wife with the black eye. And it just plays into that theme that nothing is as it seems. The good guys and the bad guys are not who you think they are. And it, like, as the credits were rolling, I'm sitting there waiting for Netflix to tell me, do you want to start an episode of Stranger Things or something? It like clicked. I'm like, this movie is no one is who they say, and that's played into everything in this movie. And that was the moment it clicked for me, that I'm just like, that is just damn smart.
Yeah. even baked into the classic, the well trod area of Evelyn Mulwray's flawed eye. I mean, it's down to everything. The film, like we said, Robert Towne lived in this script for so long. It was just long and convoluted forever and ever, and he just kept being forced to pare it down by Robert Towne and then by Roman Polanski, and to a point of, as razor sharp as it can get without feeling that it's razor sharp. Meaning it doesn't, this film doesn't, I know this is a weird thing to say, it doesn't cut like you expect it to. It's a very smooth film. It doesn't, when the information comes, it's, with one classic exception, it's not a huge revelation. It's just this info that comes out.
Yeah.
And he knows what to do next based on that. It's a perfectly written detective procedural in every possible way.
Yeah, no, it's a convoluted story. Like you said, I can't explain it start to finish to someone and say this is what happened. But I never feel like the movie is hard to follow, right? You follow JJ Gittes from start to finish, and you know what's going. You know as much as he knows as he's figuring it out, and
you know it as he knows it.
Yeah,
you don't get ahead or behind him. You are with him and feel his interpretation of what's going on all of the time.
Right, and it never feels in the moment confusing. It does feel, looking back, oh, that's a really complicated story he stumbled on, but it doesn't lose you. Like there are mysteries I've seen where it's so much wheel spinning and red herrings and, thinking it's smarter than the audience, or deliberately like throwing smoke screens at the audience just to keep the plot going. And this just unfolds so organically.
The famous example of the murder of the chauffeur in The Big Sleep in Raymond Chandler's novel, which is never explained. There's a murder that's never even resolved or solved in the middle of that book. For no reason other than we just never got around to it. It's fine, just plow through it. And it's a great novel. I am not knocking The Big Sleep. I want to be real clear about this. But yes, this does not have any of that. Everything in this movie ties up really, really, I would say too neatly, but it's not.
No,
it might be too neatly if Towne's original ending as written had been kept, if Polanski hadn't gotten a hold of it and made the ending what it actually is today.
Yeah, and that's the only ending that I think works for me. Like, that's not a movie that's heading towards a happy ending from the start. I don't feel it's heading that way.
Interestingly, though, it's an interesting debate. I don't know that it would. You can argue that, you can say that, and that's probably true of Polanski's film, but Towne's script logically actually does end there. Okay, so let's straight up now. Here's your spoiler alert. If you have never seen Chinatown, pause us, go watch Chinatown, and come back. If you watch Chinatown, yes, the original Town ending was Noah Cross is killed. And then a downpour happens in Los Angeles, which would fit in with the classic. There was always I think Schrader calls it an almost Freudian connection with water in much of film noir, which would be totally fitting that the bad guy would be killed and this giant deluge would hit Los Angeles, which would be the end of the drought that has been that has been over everything you've seen and felt in this whole movie. Famously, Polanski, said, no, blondes die in Hollywood, which is hard to refute Roman Polanski, who would know something about that. And so, yes, forced Robert Towne to basically rethink the last scene of the movie to what it is today, which is one of the most just horrifying and gut-wrenching and depressing endings, and one that fit perfectly in 1975. 74.
It feels like it fits perfectly now sometimes.
Yes, it does.
But it is that story of someone, and I guess the reason it fits for me, the reason why I feel like, oh, that's the way the movie ends, is it is just him. It's that constant encountering of the powerful get away, and in history, that's what happened. In history, that's what happened in LA, right?
Yes.
And so this is so tied into the history of LA. That's why Town wrote it too, was this, to bring back the Los Angeles he grew up in. And it feels more thematically true that this has to end with the wrong people dead, the wrong people getting away with it. It's a gut punch. Like, it still kicks you. That is, that for me hurts almost as much as the end to 7, which is kind of the same thing. The world is more corrupt than you can understand, and that's I don't know how to wrap that thought up, so we'll just edit there. But
no, that's good. No, don't. I can see where you're getting at. They are different for me. I've never thought about that, but you are onto something very interesting. I see where you make that connection, and I've never drawn it before, so I'm thinking about it, and that's exciting. And for me, the Chinatown ending is actually more depressing to me. I think it is true. It's the last line. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. You'll never understand. And for 7, the thing is, by the end of 7, you understand exactly. There is still at least the moral center of 7 still exists and acknowledges what has happened. And there's a level of acceptance in 7 that is arguably more depressing. It's less depressing to me, but I can easily say how you would argue it is a more depressing ending.
Well,
than Chinatown. She's left with, you got to remember, the last shot of Chinatown is that camera swooping up and Jake Giddy's just getting lost in the crowd. He's just another person. And it does not have the biblical weight that 7 so very much brings upon itself.
Now that I think about it,
but that's a fascinating connection, though. I'm intrigued. I want to dig deeper into this.
Well, now that I think about it, though, 7 doesn't end with that scene in the desert, right? It ends with Morgan Freeman. The world is a beautiful place.
Right.
I believe that last part, or it's him saying, "Okay, well, you can fight back against this." The moral of Chinatown, the lesson JJ Gittes learns, is really up there with Homer Simpson's "You tried your hardest and failed miserably. The lesson is never try," because he does have this past where he was stationed in Chinatown and told, "Don't get involved, don't ask questions, just do as little as possible." Well, this is him learning, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to do the right thing. And it backfires on him. It doesn't.
He's got to learn it twice.
Yeah. And that's interesting. I had not been thinking of the way 7 actually ends and how that might actually be a little more hopeful too. But it really is. It's like him becoming a cynic twice over.
Yes. And there is something, and again, it depends on your point of view. There is something upbeat about that. I mean, there is the argument that, okay, but you get the feeling, because Polanski certainly doesn't believe people change or learn or get better, that he's going to do this again. He's learned, he's experienced it again, but he hasn't learned it. He will make the same mistake again because that is his nature. And I think that I can't even remember the name of the character in 7, and I can't believe I can't. Somerset, right?
Yes, Somerset. You're right.
He, Somerset is already sort of deeply cynical and accepts this. He's more knowing than Gittes is. That's the real difference. Is that if you believe that it's all, if you're doing the best you can possibly do, and you understand that's not going to be enough, that's a really great litmus test of a question. Does that make you a pessimist or an optimist?
Yeah. Let's talk about Jack Nicholson for a minute.
Yeah, let's.
because he's up there. Him and Gene Hackman are two of the actors who, when I see them in old performances, I just realize how much I miss them on the screen and how we never really got a great like retirement role from them. I can't remember, what was Jack Nicholson's last role?
I would disagree, but did he do anything after About Schmidt?
Oh yeah, he did an Adam Sandler movie.
Did that come after that?
I believe so. Anger Management.
Oh my God, is it The Bucket List?
I think it might be The Bucket List.
I'm looking as I am searching as we talk about this. I pulled The Bucket List without knowing for sure. The last Nicholson credit on IMDb as an actor is. Oh, how do you know? Which makes sense
Brooks.
that he would do Brooks. He would do Brooks one last turn, and he's fine in that. Hackman for me did. I mean, the last performance is no good, but if if Royal Tenenbaum isn't a fantastic career capper, I don't know what is. Yeah. Hackman at least got to go out on an utter high point, being the best thing in a very good movie, and famously not getting along at all with the director and not doing anything the director wanted him to do, and still being absolutely perfect in the part. And Nicholson, of course, was supposed to do what he was supposed to do the American remake of Tony Erdmann.
Yes,
and that has fallen apart. He won't be doing that. By all accounts, he's not.
He's not in the greatest
100% healthy.
Yeah.
But
it is funny because I watched probably about a year ago. I watched The Last Detail, and that's when I thought of it as well. Like, oh my gosh, I just miss seeing him on the screen.
He's so good in that. He's so good in that.
And that was before this. That was a few years before this, or maybe
the year before. I believe 73. Another Robert Towne script.
And when was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? The year
75.
After? Okay.
Yes.
It's just funny. I'm a little younger than you. So having grown up and seen him all my life as Jack, and then to go back to these old roles, and you just miss that performance he would give. And he's so, again, this is another thing that I had remembered differently in my head. I remembered it being a really big, kind of hard-boiled performance, and that is not the performance in this movie. He very rarely raises his voice. He's not, he's very much Jack Nicholson as he would become in some ways, like the point where he's telling the dirty joke. So excited to tell that dirty joke, which is so good. But he's so often so quiet and kind of wounded in many ways too. Like he's just.
I'm attached to my nose. I enjoy breathing through it.
Yes. Yeah. He's just so good in this. And it's just such a natural performance without. I realize like. The obvious.
I did not mean that way. I'm truthfully, yes, it should be noted. I don't think it's a waste of time to say that yes, I am of the firm belief that this should have won Best Picture in 1974. I think it's a much better film than The Godfather Part 2, which is to say how good I think The Godfather Part 2 is. But I think this is better. I think this is more on point and more of its time in 1974 than Godfather Part 2 was.
What else was 1974? Conversation, right?
It's 73.
Nope. Same year. Nope.
That is 74. Conversation's a really good film too. Wouldn't have minded if that one either.
And then the other two nominees were Lenny and The Towering Inferno.
Even in the richest period of film history that existed in this country, The Towering Inferno can still get a Best Picture nod. Yes, indeed.
But no, it's just such a great performance. It was written for him, so I'm sure Robert Towne, like he seemed to know what would fit him well and what would challenge him a little bit more too. Like what would be the movie star performance for him, and it is a movie star performance. He's in every single scene of this, and he's fantastic in every single scene of this.
Yeah, he has to be. He's got to carry the entire thing and lets everybody else have their moments John Huston is also spectacular in this, just on the razor's edge of hemming it up. Like it's just as John Huston did in real life whenever having the opportunity. He's going big. He is not shying away from this, and nor should he. They have crafted the film so that he can do that. It was a brilliant piece of casting to have him play this. It is, even if you don't know the interpersonal history of John Huston and Jack Nicholson, who of course was dating Angelica Houston at the time, those scenes crackle with that energy, even if you don't know that history. Just as the casting of the casting in Godfather 2 accomplishes the exact same thing. If you use the history of the people between themselves interpersonally to make these scenes snap and crackle in really interesting ways, and this film does. I love all of the scenes with Noah Cross in this movie. I love all of the scenes in this movie. I could say that about anything, Chris.
It's just a really great movie.
Yes.
No, what I like about John Huston in this is he's walking up to that edge, like you said, of hammy. But I think what's key is he doesn't play it as sinister. It's folksy in many ways. And it's kind of a folksy evil. Like, you can tell like he's not a good guy, but he's also charming. He's really fun to watch. And
Mr. Gittis. Yes. Yeah.
No, it's Mr. Gitz. He never pronounces it right.
Mr. Gitz.
Even after he's corrected, I love that little power play he does. Like he's corrected by Jack Nicholson, and then he still pronounces it Gitz because he's rich and powerful.
Well, yeah, and authority that knows it's not going to lose is more frightening, and that's what that is. That's what that character is. That character never gets upset. That character never gets mad. He knows he's going to get what he wants.
Yep,
and that's horrible. That's so much scarier.
I also think, didn't the book reveal that Angelica Houston was there the day when they were filming the scene where he's like, "Are you sleeping with my daughter?"
I believe that's correct. I don't remember that exact detail, but it would not surprise me because I know sure as hell Polanski would make sure she was.
Yeah,
he knows that's going to make that song, that scene sing.
And then Faye Dunaway as well, just fantastic. Like it's. Again, I watched it, like I remembered enough about it where I knew, the big iconic moments, the nose, know the she's my sister, she's my daughter. Yes. And knowing that when you watch Faye Dunaway's performance, it's just, it's so fascinating to watch just the little ticks she brings into that performance whenever her father's mentioned, or she's talking about her husband, just the little stumbles in her voice or the way she closes up a little bit. It's really just, I mean, when you're talking about one of the greater movies ever made, you're going to keep coming back to, it's just a great performance.
And it is. And I have many an issue with Faye Dunaway. We'll get into this deeper next time when we're talking about Network. But it's an almost thankless part as written, because she is not at no point is she presented as the classic sort of Barbara Stanwyck femme fatale. Like, she's not, you don't, at least I never have. And I don't know if that's just familiarity with the film from a really young age and an inability to pick up on these things when I was so young when I first saw it. But, she never seems manipulative to me throughout the movie, even watching it now, trying to pick up on this. There's stuff she's not sharing, but it never feels like Jake is in trouble for her gain. You know what I mean? Like, she's not using him for her own gain at any point in this story. And that is rare for this kind of story. That's usually not how this goes. And she is such a story function. She does not exist on her own terms as a character. And I think that makes it a really difficult character to play. So all the more credit to Faye Dunaway for finding all of the right notes to play in those scenes, and especially in the big scene, which is, truthfully, I love the passages in the book about the filming of the sister-daughter scene, because it is it is on paper seemingly an actor's worst nightmare. I don't know how you play that, which is exactly what Dunaway didn't know how to do.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing, I don't know where you go to make this grounded in any sort of reality that you can play. And she, everybody finds a way to do it, whatever help she gets from everybody. And it's one of those things like we've talked about where it works because every single aspect of the film is leading you to it. It is in the cinematography. It is in the production design. Shout out to Richard Silbert, the iconic production designer who worked with regularly in Paramount in this period, but yes, for Polanski and also throughout Mike Nichols' career. He shows up in the fantastic Mike Nichols biography from this year as well as a character. Just the costumes, just everything works to help sell that moment that is such a movie moment and is the one truthfully music crescendo dramatic moment in the movie. Not that there's a music crescendo, it does have that much subtlety, but it is the moment in the movie.
Dun, dun,
and
dun.
to let it and to let it pass and to let it not be the climax of the movie is really impressive. It's great the way you get this big moment and there's still a good 20 minutes of movie.
Yeah, no, I think I was thinking about like, okay, if this was a movie that was, someone's going to hear this and they're going to take the idea. But, if they, God forbid, remade it as a Paramount Plus TV series, that would be a twist. That would be your climactic twist that sends everyone reeling out. It's a revelation here, not a twist. It's not the crying game, the end of the crying game, like, jaws dropping things. It's there, but it informs the whole rest of the movie. And thematically, it's there, this whole idea that, there's a worse evil than what he is initially, he's looking into. It's there, it informs it, it's not cheap, and it affects what happens in the next 30 minutes of the movie.
Yes, absolutely. It is the beginning of Act 3. It's not the huge reveal at the end.
Going back to, you mentioned musical cue. Jerry Goldsmith's score is just so damn good in this too.
Yes, and to know how much Polanski didn't want it is fantastic.
Well, have you heard the original score? I'm sure you have.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and oh wow, it's not subtle. It's not wallpaper. Who was it? Was it Evans who said to get this score? Who replaced it?
Yes. Okay. It was the most, aside from hiring Polanski himself to wrangle town, it was the second biggest thing that Robert Evans did as the producer of this movie, which of course famously, and again, we should probably talk a little about Robert Evans here for those that don't know. Robert Evans was the head of Paramount from about 1967 to about 1974, 75. The Big Goodbye goes into a great amount of the political detail of how he stayed in that position and who his biggest enemies were in that position. And he was so popular and successful that this was his first solo venture. So his enemies within Paramount hated the fact that he was using Paramount's muscle to get this movie made and was going to profit personally from it, as well as being the head of the studio from it, and attempted to use that to both destroy him, the movie, and get him out of Paramount. And Evans was, if you've never seen The Kid Stays in the Picture, the excellent documentary made from Robert Evans' autobiography of the same name, or if you've never listened to the audiobook of The Kid Stays in the Picture, which is Robert Evans reading his own autobiography, which you should really do if you never have. He was a fantastically entertaining figure in the history of movies. And he famously in this period could not keep the respect of any director he worked with because he would keep taking credit for the final product. But yes, if he could take any credit for Chinatown, it's for hiring Roman Polanski and for getting that incredibly discordant, off-putting score that Polanski wanted wiped from it, and getting Jerry Goldsmith to write him a old-fashioned Hollywood score in 48 hours.
Well, what's funny too is when you read the book, when you read The Big Goodbye, and even when you read Kid Stays in the Picture, you get this sense that this was a constant battle of back and forths, right? Like, I think Evans didn't like the cinematography that was showing up. He didn't like those harsh colors that I like very much in this. He wisely didn't like the score. And, you know, there are some films that are very much the director's baby. They feel, you know, you talk about a Woody Allen film, it's Woody Allen, you know, there are thousands of people working with him on that, but it's, you talk about Woody Allen. That's one of the reasons why I have never brought up, let's talk about Woody Allen, because then you got to talk about Woody Allen. And I don't know that I'm comfortable doing that yet. Polanski's one of those guys who I'm not sure I'm comfortable always talking about Polanski, even though he arguably made great movies. Didn't inarguably made great movies. He made
inarguably. Thank you.
Yeah. He, you know, but when you talk about Chinatown, this is very much, I mean, this is Robert Towne with that script, but Polanski had the idea for the ending. Robert Evans hires Polanski. He also insists on that score. You don't have anything if Robert Towne didn't want to write this for Jack Nicholson. It is, you know, we talk a lot about movies are this collaborative medium. This is what happens when you bring these great collaborators and they really collaborate. Like sometimes, or they fight each other on it, but everyone
or they reach, or in Towne's case, or they reach the point where they realize they have to cede control because they've been paid too much. That's which is what happened with Towne on this script. And it's appropriate that the only Oscar it won was screenplay for Robert Towne, because I mean, if it's Roman Polanski's film, and it doesn't exist without Robert Towne. Robert Towne is the god of this world. Let's get that very straight. He created it. Polanski shot it and made it a movie, but this movie does not exist without Robert Towne, who I will give first and foremost credit for its existence. And one of the most horrifying things about The Big Goodbye for me is I didn't know Towne's story through the 80s and 90s and what an asshole he was. I did not know that, which was that was sad for me, because I not that I did as a young man when I was discovering this period of film. Robert Towne was a mythical figure. this great script doctor who touched all of these amazing films throughout this period, and then made a couple of really interesting films as a director. That was a bummer to learn what an asshole he is.
Yeah,
or became.
Well, what was kind of a bummer reading the book is how there's this great moment where they're, you know, Jack Nicholson, Robert Towne, Roman Polanski, all collaborating on this. Yeah. And then that fizzles right at, like, Roman Polanski arrested shortly after this. Jack Nicholson, like, hey, he wants, you know, he was this big guy who left, you know, piles of money on his table for a while for his artist friends. And then he's Jack after this. Robert Towne, asshole. Mission Impossible 2. You know,
it's not his fault that Mission Impossible 2 is terrible.
He's the only screenwriter on that. But anyways,
he didn't write the doves.
He did not write the
We know who to blame for Mission Impossible 2. Let's be real clear. That's John Woo's poop. Okay, let's be real clear. That's the number 2. It belongs to John Woo. All right.
But it is this movie where, you know, it's this kind of lightning strikes moment where, hey, this is what we can do. And then almost its success, you know, kind of makes this kind of thing a little bit harder, a little more impossible. It's really, I mean, that's where the book kind of left me is, oh, this movie was great. And because it was great, everyone's life went on a different trajectory. Hollywood started going in a different trajectory. Oh, you know, it's kind of a downer of an ending in the book, but it makes for a great book.
Yeah. And it's all tied into, as I was talking about earlier, the political machinations within Paramount at the time. To, you know, if you again, these are it's no fun to talk about the executives ever, but the story of the feud between Evans and Frank Yablans is, you know, if you don't know it, that book is a perfect place to learn about it. And if you do know about it, you can see how that becomes there was that brief gasp from 67 to 70, we'll even call it 77, until Star Wars, where studios were bought by multinational corporations who didn't know for sure what to do, and so they let these people make movies, and then they figured out how to make so much money out of them. And so made that happen and turned it into The Factory and made state of the art a phrase that people thought was good. and led to with the returns of Star Wars and Jaws, and then Star Wars, the 80s. And then we can get into the indie movement that follows in that wake and talk about the crash of that in the 90s, but let's not get into that right now. That's this great era of film, and that's why I love the title of the book. I love the title of Watson's book, is The Big Goodbye. It is such a great throwback to Chandler and to talking about this period of Hollywood history that was so brief.
Yeah,
it's so brief. It's so short, and it's good.
And the year after this is Jaws, and and there's a reason why we're doing a summer of 70s and we're not talking about Star Wars, and we're not. I love Jaws. Jaws is in Ann Arbor tomorrow night. Jaws is actually, as we're recording, it's playing in Ann Arbor tomorrow night. And I asked my wife if my son was too young to see it, and he is. But I was really thinking about it.
Can it be more horrifying than Space Jam 2? I don't think so. I don't think so.
But it's funny too, because I did read, I read Robert Evans' book a few months ago. I read The Big Goodbye right after that. And then just about a month ago, I read Dave Itzkoff's book on the making of Network. So I feel like this whole era, it's just been kind of a crash course in, and it is fascinating because it doesn't feel like the current day where there's, everything has to be existing IP. Everything has to be easily sold and franchisable, or, owned by Warner Brothers so that you can run LeBron James through all of it. It really is this time where they wanted to make art. They wanted to make a statement, but they would also, that movie, Chinatown, was one of the top grossing movies of the year, I believe.
Absolutely.
That would not happen today. Like, I don't know that was. I don't want to say it wouldn't
say that, but I don't know that that's true.
I mean,
I gotta be. I mean, every year there are. Yes, it is the kind of movie that is hard to get made, because but movies that are hard to get made still get made. So I mean, yes, it was much easier to get them made in 1974 than in 2021, but. Yes, it was better then. Yes, in the sense that it was easier then. Yes, absolutely. It's just different now. Yeah. It's a different time, and it will be interesting to see coming out of, all of that is a response culturally to the Nixon era. I am curious to see what happens coming out of the Trump era. It could be another, really dirty, depressing era for American popular culture, but some really great art's going to come out of that. and way better than what came out in the 80s.
And just
so I'm hopeful. I am hopeful.
Well, the thing you're guaranteed is following that, more Star Wars. We're going to have that forever. One last thing on this movie. I have not seen the sequel, The Two Jakes. Have you? I'm assuming you have seen it.
I saw it so long ago. I think I saw it. I think I saw it when it first came out on video. I did not see it in the theater because I knew the reviews were terrible, and I didn't really need to have Chinatown besmirched in any capacity. And I remember almost nothing about it. I remember it better from the really excellent description of the making of it that's in The Big Goodbye.
Okay.
It covers that so well that that's all you need to know about it. You need to know why it happened and why it fell apart more than actually seeing it. You're not going to learn a whole lot seeing it. It is a disappointment. And the less said about it, the better. But what needs to be said about it is said in The Big Goodbye.
Evans writes about it a lot too, from probably a different perspective. He's definitely more of a victim in his telling of it. it is interesting to hear they wanted to do 3 of these, and I had heard rumors. I don't know how true this is, but I had heard rumors that the 3rd was going to be called Cloverleaf and deal with the transportation industry.
Yes,
and
it was always meant to be
that.
Water, power, and cars.
Yep. And the ideas for that, once they decided, hey, we're not moving forward with that, got pulled into Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I don't know if the timing lines up for that to be true. But it is funny because when I first saw Chinatown, I had seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit multiple times. I love that movie. And I remember when it was revealed that Tied into Water, I'm like, oh, this is just like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And not thinking in my head, Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out about 15 years later and was definitely riffing off this, but that's a story from 10 years ago.
It's another great, again, in its own way, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, absolutely a noir. Totally. Sure.
Okay, one more thing on this, and you brought it up at the very start, so it is good to close on this too. You can, I a lot of times people will, go ahead and they'll make a noir, and it very heavily feels like, oh, they're playing homage to this. They're riffing on this. They have the voiceover narration, and they have this, and it's trying very hard to tell you, hey, we're doing this thing again. And I think that, I don't know if it's age with Chinatown, that it's just aged so well that it feels like one of the great noirs, or if it just always felt so organically like that it never feels like an homage or a throwback. It just feels like an organic, good detective story.
Yeah. I think it was so classic, it probably felt that way at the time. Like I said, it feels old and yet was so contemporary for 1974, and I think it still feels that way. It doesn't play. It plays like a classic because it is, not because it's evoking classics, and it avoids so many of the so many noir tropes. Like, I recently rewatched Double Indemnity, which I hadn't seen for a few years, which is quintessential, arguably the ultimate sort of explanation of what noir looked like coming out of a Hollywood studio in the 40s. And in that, Barbara Stanwyck's doing everything that Faye Dunaway's doing in this movie. If you know what's going on, you can watch her throughout the entire thing and understand exactly what's happening. Not that it's the same character by any means. I'm not saying that Faye Dunaway is copying her in any capacity.
It's the
just
archetype.
saying that is a film that has, and it's a film in which there's no surprises. That's the thing about noir. In the great noirs, it is pointless. Noirs are not happy. Noirs are not happy at all. They are the past catching up with you. They are your inability to get away with it, whatever it happens to be. And the condition that you live with all the time, that anxiety and that guilt that you live with constantly. That's what noir is. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, is that the interesting thing about Chinatown is it doesn't have that until the very end. You think Geddes is on top of it and getting away with it, and there is no sign that he isn't until the very end, which is when it shuts down, and what makes you go, oh yeah, this is not just a detective film, because there are detective films that aren't noirs. This is a noir through and through.
And with that, I think that brings us to the end of Chinatown.
It's Chinatown, Chris.
I was going to try and roll into that.
It's Chinatown.
I knew that was going to come.
Remember it, Chris. It's Chinatown. It's one of the all-time greats.
Perry, would you like to tell the good people what we're going to be talking about next week? Or in 2 weeks?
I'm so
next
excited.
Episode.
In 2 weeks, we're going to do a Sidney Lumet double feature. I highly recommend you check these out if you haven't seen them. We're going to talk about both Network, another Faye Dunaway film, and Dog Day Afternoon, for my money, one of the 10 great films of the decade. I'm excited to talk about Dog Day Afternoon because, man, if you've never seen it, you do yourself a big old favor and watch Dog Day Afternoon as soon as you can, for one of the all-time great Al Pacino performances, the best performance of John Cazale's career. And a film that, as we've been talking about, still feels for as much of a media satire, not even satire, for as much about the media in 1975, I think three for Dog Day Afternoon. It's for not having the internet, it still feels pretty modern. And pretty on point. The same movie could be made today. It would just be different kinds of cameras.
I am looking forward to that. Dog Day Afternoon is a blind spot for me. Network is
I'm
not.
so excited for you to see it.
Network is
So
not a
excited
blind
for you to see Dog Day
spot for
Afternoon.
me. I'm glad to talk about Network when it is no longer, relevant, but which is obviously a joke, but
of course. And it'll be great to get to pay homage to Ned Beatty. Rest in peace, Ned Beatty, one of the all-time great monologues ever delivered in movie history.
In the meantime, Perry, where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Perry Loves Film. You can hear me on the Lucy Ann Lance Show every Friday on WLBY in Ann Arbor. And you can sometimes hear me on... I know the name of the show.
Cathode Ray Mission.
It's the Cathode Ray Mission podcast. You can sometimes hear me on the Cathode Ray Mission podcast. I know we have a Tarantino episode coming up in the fall. And where can we find you, Chris?
You can find me. The best place is my newsletter, Criticisms. I am still writing about the films of the summer of 1996, which I regret horribly. Taking that on. I was doing great until I got to the Nutty Professor. But that's not all it is. Occasionally I'll just write about anything that kind of strikes my fancy. I just did a piece on the Marvel movies. And on Sundays, I am doing a Sundays with Spielberg series. Some of it are just republishing what I was doing a year ago until I catch up. We are almost caught up, which means I'm almost going to finally get to watch Empire of the Sun, which I'm very much looking forward to. You can also read my thoughts about Christian culture at Pathos. I'll put a link in the show notes. And occasionally I do a podcast called the Jesus Junkyard Podcast, where we talk about Christian pop culture. But the newsletter is the best place to find me. It comes out every week. You can find it on Substack. There is a link in the show notes, and we will be back in 2 weeks.